I am going to get started. It is 10:02. So today we're going to talk about two of the properties, Circa and Arequipa, very new property, just opened mid last year. We're going to talk about the beloved Titilaka on Lake Titicaca, but I'm going to do kind of a journey through Arequipa up to Lake Titicaca. So I want to talk about the properties, of course, a little bit, because that's what I do. I represent the properties, but I want to kind of take you guys to these destinations and really so you understand the importance of them, how to sell them, who they're for, and give you kind of some historical context, cultural context to the destinations as well. Sorry, this might be repetitive for those that joined on the Inca Terra one yesterday, but I just want to give a quick recap currently of what the situation is in Peru. I don't have definitive answers or a crystal ball, but I'm just going to give you some kind of facts. So Peru was super quick on the lockdown in terms of March 15th. I think here in San Francisco, you're on March 16th when they had stay at home. In Peru, they kind of took it up a notch. Everyone's at home. It's like policed. It's been very serious. They've also restricted or banned travel between the provinces of Peru. If you look at the numbers, so currently they have around 55,000 cases as of this week that are confirmed cases, very, very low death rate. Out of those cases, vast majority of them are in Lima, which is, the largest. It's like 11 million people that live there. And, the numbers, if you look at the number of confirmed cases in Peru versus others, you're like, wow, that seems really high. But the thing is that Peru's been like light years beyond many countries in terms of testing. So that was straight in April. They ramped it up like 15-fold. And so they're doing, just like right behind Brazil, the number of tests. Brazil has 7 times the population, and they're doing the same number of testing that Chile has, which only has half the population of Peru. So they've really taken this seriously. Speaking with all my Peruvian friends there, I mean, they say that in terms of the quarantine, stay at home has been very, very strict. One person is allowed out of the house a week to go do essential shopping, and they do that by gender. Nice thing is that the central bank there and the government has been sending stimulus checks to residents. There's also been support for very low interest loans to businesses to help prop them up. So as we know with countries that are, have support from their government, they're going to be able to bounce back quicker than those countries that are not providing this type of support to their population. Yay for all my Peruvian friends, May 10th is when the quarantine is set to expire. And Peru has a really good plan for reopening where they're going to start with some parts of the economy like mining, things like that initially. And then they're going to do a month by month, like a gradual 10 to 15% increase of the economy. The only things that have been mentioned in terms that relate to tourism is they're saying that they're expecting to open up their international airspace, so around international arrivals by July. And then, and other tourism services like transport and restaurants going to be open on like limited capacity. Then they're expected by August to have the doors open fully for tourism. And again, this is going to depend on a month by month basis in terms of how they open it up. If they see a spike, they're going to have to dial that back. We don't have any like concrete plans in terms of, when these hotels are going to open or what they're going to be operating at like a limited capacity or what, things that we obviously have ideas of what we're going to be doing at the hotels, but I just don't want to speak too soon on this because as we know, things change, week by week. So we're going to start off in Arequipa talking about Circa. We're talking about Arequipa and Circa as a place to stay there. So Circa is in the city of Arequipa. Incredible place. I lived in Peru for 10 years between 97 and 2007, and I led trips all around Peru, and Arequipa was like always on itineraries, and I felt that it started to really fall off maybe around the 2007 period when I left and moved to San Francisco. I think a lot of that was just because luxury hotel development really focused in Cusco and the Sacred Valley and other areas, and Arequipa, nothing really happened there. But Arequipa for me, I dealt with a lot of European groups, British groups that were long haul flying to Peru. And they wanted to start someplace and acclimate and kind of have like an easy entry into Peru. Lima sometimes is a bit overwhelming with, 10, 11 million people, whereas this is an easy 1-hour flight. You get to Arequipa, it's the second largest city in Peru, but it's only got 1 million inhabitants. So it's a very manageable size. The best thing about it is the climate is phenomenal. In Arequipa, they have over 300 days of sunshine a year that sits kind of on the edge of the Atacama Desert and the Andes. So you get that perfect kind of desert climate, but it's elevated a little bit, so it never gets super hot as it does lowland by the coast in the Atacama. And this is a real, Arequipa is a really unique, I would say very European of all the cities in Peru in terms of the architecture, the culture, the history of it. The setting is spectacular as well. You're right at the base of these 3 massive volcanoes. You've got Misti, Chichani, and Pichu Pichu. Both Misti and Chichani are over 19,000 feet. They're like 19.8. And then Pichu Pichu, which is a large, this is actually, we're looking at Pichu Pichu as a large mass where this is about 18.7. 18,700 feet. So really rich agricultural valley because of the water coming down from these mountains and the volcanic soil. So a lot of agriculture there. So it's a great city to also escape out of. It's not a massive city, so it's a great place to explore. One thing that makes Arequipa a great first stop on itineraries, and why I always used to include it when I would lead these trips, is that in terms of elevation wise, it's kind of at a perfect elevation. If you're, everyone's going to be going on to Cusco in the Sacred Valley, maybe going to Lake Titicaca, this is a great place to acclimate. It's at 7,600 feet. You can arrive in Peru rather than, people are not into like mega cities like Lima. Arrive, jump on a quick 1 hour flight. There's tons of flights during the day. You get to Arequipa, you have this wonderful weather, wonderful culture. It's, Lima is a real city, really urban. When you get to Arequipa, it has a lot of charm, a lot of Peruvian charm, a lot of culture and history. And with that weather and the altitude, is a great place to acclimate just for a couple days and ease into Peru before going on to say Cusco or to the Lake Titicaca. So, hour and a half flight from Lima. Since it is the second largest city, there's flights normally like every 30 minutes leaving Lima from 4:30 in the morning until 9 p.m. They also have daily flights, twice daily flights to Cusco. So it connects well if people want to start in Arequipa, go to Cusco, or do it vice versa. And last year, there was I think it's called JetSmart Airlines in Chile, that's doing some interesting routes in South America. They started a direct flight between Santiago de Chile and Arequipa. That same airline is like also flying Santiago de Iguazu Falls. So really cool kind of the routes that they're opening up. So it's very accessible by air, by road as well. It's on a major highway network, so you can go from there. I'm going to talk about this a bit more, but it's the jumping off place to get to the Colca Canyon. So if you are going to go to the Colca Canyon, you come to Arequipa, and that's where you generally start from. And then we're going to take a journey over to Lake Titicaca driving once we leave Arequipa. Also, some people that want to see Nazca lines turn it into a road trip. They'll leave Lima, they'll drive down the coast to visit Nazca area and spend a couple nights seeing the Nazca lines and everything there is to do there, and then carry on to Arequipa itself. Belmont 2 years ago started a rail service. So they've had the rail service, but they introduced this like overnight sleeper rail service that went from Cusco to Puno at Lake Titicaca and then on to Arequipa and back. So that is also an option if that train continues to operate. So really good connection to get to Arequipa overall. In terms of when you arrive into Arequipa airport, it's just a short 25-minute drive to get down to where Circa, the property, is located. It's just off of the main square, as you can see in this map. It's just a block off of the main plaza, which is the previous picture we had looked at. So in talking about Circa, the owner of this is a fellow named Ignacio Macias. Some of you probably know him. He's been involved in a lot of really cutting-edge hotel design in Peru. He is actually the son-in-law of Joey Kecklin, the founder of Inca Terra. And so after Ignacio had done his MBA at Wharton, he came back and he worked for his father-in-law at Inca Terra, and he was involved in really the kind of development and commercialization of Inca Terra's hotel product worldwide. And then he kind of decided just to go independently and do his own thing. He opened up Titilaka, which we're going to talk about in this webinar. And then he got involved in Hotel B in Lima. He was one of the creative minds behind that. He was a partner in it initially. He's since left that group, and he has another small kind of bed and breakfast boutique hotel called A Temporal in Miraflores in Lima. So, same, his sister, who also does a lot of the interior design for Inca Terra, is involved in this project. Another interior designer, Jordi Puig, is also involved. So a lot of the same team that are involved in Inca Terra, but Ignacio was just kind of doing his own thing. In terms of the property, so Arequipa was founded in 1540. Really rich colonial history, and so this property dates back to that period. This is actually part of a large compound there, and so this building was abandoned when Ignacio bought it. So this is the entrance to it. This is the old key that they actually found in the archives of this monastery. So that is like the symbol of the hotel and on all the current keys as well. And so this is kind of designed as a parador. So essentially like pays homage to the monks that used to live here in this monastery. So it's all very clean design, kind of simplistic monastic feel to the property overall. What you're looking at too is that this entire city, so they call Arequipa the White City. It's because of that volcanic soil around it. There's a layer of rock, which is called sierra. It's like a really porous white volcanic stone. Basically everything in Arequipa is made out of this white volcanic rock called sierra. And it's amazing because the amount of sunshine that they get and everything is this bright white color. So that's partly why it's called the White City. So everything's made out of these beautiful CR blocks. So I'm just going to walk you through the property a little bit, kind of looking at the central patio and common area. So a lot of open air to sit out here with, fires going in the evening time as well. It was called Circa, just kind of as like alluding to the time period of when was this established in 1540, but then using the Q for Arequipa. This is a little plunge pool that's in the central patio as well. So again, like a very simple monastic feel of serenity here. And again, you're right in the middle of Arequipa where this sits. This again, some of the common areas and lounges. It's an extremely small property. It's only 11 rooms. And, you know, I talked about Arequipa used to be a really popular tourism destination that kind of fell off the map because of luxury hotel development in the rest of Peru. This is the first luxury boutique hotel to be built in Arequipa. When Ignacio told me, you know, I think I would do something in Arequipa next, I was like, dude, you nailed it. That is the perfect thing to do because Arequipa has so much to offer. It's such a beautiful city, but there's just like large, boring convention style hotels there. Like Arequipa is going to be reinvented by this hotel. So it just opened, I want to say in March, April of 2019. Kind of a bad time to open a hotel now in retrospect, but so walking you through the rooms, so only 11 rooms. These are two of the most simple rooms, the claustro room, so very small, kind of, you know, again, the monastic feel of them. And then we have 5 of the aposento, which is kind of the medium range room. So here's a couple shots of these as well, of the aposento rooms. This is being recorded. I'm going to send it to you afterwards as well. So if you want to dig in more to what those rooms, like the size of them and everything. And then the suites are these bovedas. These are beautiful, beautiful rooms that can be twin or king bedded. A lot of these are right off the central courtyard. And I have been asked before seeing these pictures, what about the windows? There are beautiful window coverings now that come down. These pictures were taken before those were installed, but there's blackout curtains for privacy. So these are the boveda rooms. Has that beautiful kind of like, you know, monastery arched ceiling there. And this is something unique because this is something that the Incan Empire in Peru, before the arrival of the Spaniards, the Incas, even though they were master stonemasons and builders, they had never, I don't know, discovered it, I think, but they never utilized arches in any of their construction. So that's why you find so much of this colonial construction in Peru. They really emphasize all these arches and ceilings because it was something that the Andean people never built in. They would do trapezoidal niches, more so for seismic earthquake stuff, but they never really used arches in any of their building. So Arequipa is a huge gastronomic destination. So there are 2 restaurants here. There's a first floor restaurant that's only for hotel guests. And then they have a separate entrance off the street, which goes up onto the rooftop eatery, which is also open to the public for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres and stuff. So you can look out over the city. So this is the dining room that's private for hotel guests. And then I don't have pictures of the rooftop thing because that was being completed just recently. The cuisine is really interesting, and Arequipa itself, you know, Peru is known for its gastronomy overall, but you have like coastal cuisine, you have Andean cuisine, you have Amazonian cuisine. And what's neat about Arequipa is that because it sits here kind of in the Andean region, so it has that kind of colonial Andean vibe with a lot of potatoes and tubers and roots and stuff, it's very close to the ocean. It's only a couple hours drive to get down to the coast where the fisheries are very, very rich. So you have this wonderful fusion of like spicy, like, you know, peppers that are grown in the area, plus with seafood as well. So culinarily, Arequipa is a wonderful place. So the restaurant here is fantastic, but there's incredible restaurants all around Arequipa as well. Again, so a nice alternative to like the mega city of Lima is to come and like dive into Peru here in Arequipa. So the way that they operate this hotel, it can be booked 2 ways. You can either book it just as a half board, which is, you know, including breakfast, lunch, or dinner you can choose from. What you want to take, you have welcome tea and everything. They give everybody a mobile hotspot so they have a Wi-Fi connectivity when they're wandering around the city, or they do this fully inclusive, which actually includes a private vehicle, a private guide, private airport transfers, VIP lounge access, and then includes the excursions that they operate with their private vehicles and guides there. So kind of a, you know, a fully inclusive experience at Arequipa. So talking about what to do in Arequipa itself, what are the excursions that are included? Here's a list of them, but I kind of want to just talk through a few of them that are notable of like, why would someone go to Arequipa? What is there to do there? So again, the city's just phenomenal. This combination of this colonial city with the volcano surrounding it. So this is a lovely place visually to walk around and explore all these little cobblestone streets and looking at the different architecture and the building styles. You know, some of it's all that white, but they do a lot of this painting of the buildings. It's almost like Portuguese, like almost like you're in Lisbon or so, these brightly colored buildings where they still accentuate the CR coming out on the facade of these buildings. One of the most popular tourist destinations or attractions in Arequipa is the Santa Catalina Monastery. This was the largest monastery in the New World by the Spanish, and it operated, I think, only until maybe 50 years ago or so. And this takes up, I don't know, probably 5 entire city blocks. And it is incredible. I mean, walking through this here, it says silence. I mean, you're just walking through this and the beautiful flowers, the architecture and the colors. So you're like going through this like ochre orange area, and then you go into areas where the columns are blue, and like learning about what monastic life was for the nuns that lived in this monastery over the time, and what an important part it played for the development of Arequipa itself as a industrial center for Peru. So this is like a photographer's dream. I don't think I have pictures of it, but there's like great shots where you can get framed things of the snow-capped volcanoes underneath the arches and everything. So this is worth a full, like, you know, half day just wandering around the Santa Catalina Monastery itself, and then visiting the various cathedrals and chapels there, which are quite unique. There's also great markets. This is the San Camilo market. And again, you see all that fusion of food from the coast and from the Andes and stuff that's brought in from the Amazon. So the markets in Peru are just fascinating, the food markets, and that's no different in Arequipa itself. Sorry, this picture is a little bit morose, but I think this is actually one of the coolest things. So my single favorite museum in Peru is in Arequipa. It's called the Santuario Andino, or the Andean Sanctuary Museum. And what it contains is, this is Juanita, the Ice Maiden. So all these surrounding volcanoes around Arequipa, the Incan, you know, shamans and stuff used to do a lot of human sacrifices on the roof of these volcanoes. And it was back in 1995. This is a mountaineer named Johann Reinhard, and he was climbing with a local guy named Miguel Zarate, who's from Arequipa. He's a mountaineer. Miguel Zarate and his family still live in Arequipa, and they lead mountaineering expeditions around Peru. But they were climbing Ampato. There had been a recent mini eruption, and this frozen girl, who was, I think, about 13 years old, was uncovered. And the thing, because of the high, super dry altitude and the cold air, she's been perfectly preserved. And so they rushed her down, and she's been, you know, she's in a climate controlled thing in that museum nowadays. But a lot of the knowledge and research that's been done in terms of these like human sacrifice things that the Incas did came from her, because she was so well organized. There was even, she was even had in her stomach content, like half digested food, that they were able to see what her last meal was and know how long it was before she was sacrificed. Even she had some floral arrangements as a necklace that were perfectly preserved, all the textile, hair, everything. So an incredible, you know, source of information about some of these Incan traditions there. And there's multiple ones, but Juanita is there in that museum, and they have all the artifacts that they found from all the volcanoes around there. It is an incredible, incredible museum, and it really gives a good segue just kind of into Incan tradition and their, you know, earth-centric practices. You can also go out and visit these CR quarries outside of Arequipa, which are really cool. They still quarry the stuff by hand into these blocks. And so, I mean, it's kind of a vital thing to see if you're coming to Arequipa, since everything is built out of the CR. Arequipa is the de facto center of the alpaca, or like basically the textile and fiber trade in Peru. A lot of it's still run by like Italian, Swiss, German families that came to Peru that had mills back in Europe, and they came here and kind of established the trade. So you can go visit the alpaca farms outside of town, and the main textile factories there, and all of their like almost outlet stores and stuff. So like really to buy the very best alpaca and vicuña product, you find that in Arequipa. So that's a great attraction. And then there's other things around Arequipa, like more that we rely on third-party providers to do. There's great outdoors there. So there's incredible hiking outside of town, out in the countryside. There's incredible mountain biking, and there's really good whitewater rafting as well. You've got the Rio Chile, which is good, like class 3, class 4 whitewater. That's only 30 minutes or so outside of town. There's actually a couple sections, one that goes right through town. So for outdoor enthusiasts, if you're not just looking for like culture and city and arts, you want to do some outdoor stuff, this is a great place for it as well. This is the Colca Canyon. Again, as I talked, if you're going to the Colca Canyon, Arequipa is where you go to as a jumping off spot to get to the Colca Canyon. It's quite a long drive that goes over a pretty high pass, but it's well worth the journey getting there. I mean, the terracing in this valley is absolutely phenomenal. And culturally, it's very unique, the people that live there. So there's kind of two principal ethnic groups that inhabit the Colca Canyon. You've got the Cabañas and the Coyaga people, and their dress is just phenomenal. I mean, looking at the embroidery of these women's hats and these vests is fascinating. And again, this is a type of indigenous dress that you won't find anywhere else in Peru. This is specific to the Colca Canyon. And this is really good because everyone comes to Peru and they meet these indigenous people and like, oh, these are Incas. Like, no, the Incas was like an Incan empire that kind of ruled all these individual ethnic groups around Peru. But as you travel through Peru, you know, every valley and every island, you have these different dress and different traditions. These are all people that were unified under the Incan Empire. So these people, yeah, were ruled under the Incan Empire for a couple hundred years, but they're carrying on life as Coyagas living in the Colca Canyon. So, you know, the landscape of the Colca Canyon, the cultures of the canyon, And then the other interesting thing there is it's one of the best places in South America to see Andean condors soaring. There's a spot called Cruz del Condor. So from the various hotels that exist in the valley, it's maybe about an hour drive down the canyon to get to this area, where as the morning thermals start, you have these massive condors. I mean, you can see 30, 40 condors in the morning soaring just right past you this close, right at eye level. So it's a really phenomenal thing to see. It is a long journey to get out to the Colca Canyon, and kind of taxing on the body because of the altitude and the curvy road. So I'd say most people come to Arequipa and they might go into the Colca Canyon, maybe spend 2 or 3 nights, and then come back to Arequipa to then fly on somewhere, or they'll go to the Colca Canyon and then carry on to another destination. Speaking of that, how I'm pairing this is connecting with Ignacio's other property on Lake Titicaca at Titilaka. So they do programs. These are sister properties. They're both managed by the same company. So if you're combining these 2 properties, Circa and Titilaka, guests are only going to have to check into one of them, and they're going to check out the other. So all of the accounting systems and guest preferences are integrated with these properties. So they'll be able to check in at Circa, start a tab there, and then be able to check out and pay for everything at Titilaka, or vice versa if they're doing those combined. So going direct from Arequipa to Titilaka, it's about a 6-hour drive. And then if they want to do stuff along the way, you're going to add another 3 hours to maybe do picnics and do walks and stuff like that. But the drive going over there, you're going in an area where very few tourists get to see. This area is actually a national reserve called the Salinera and Iguala Blanca Reserve. And so it's really high pasture land with all of these snow-capped volcanoes around it. Here we see a vicuña, which is one of the species of camelids. These are wild, never been domesticated there. Kind of going towards the Colca Canyon, you see some cool stuff. This is going over a pass, and this mountain you see behind here, this is actually Mount Mismi, which is the source of the Amazon River. So if you were to trace the Amazon River up, it's 4,100 miles length, where it outflows into the Atlantic. The very first drop of the river is starting on this mountain outside of Arequipa called Mount Mismi. So it's a pretty amazing thing to see. And all these rocks you see in the foreground are called apachetas. And this is a way for the local people to kind of pay homage to the mountain gods when they cross over a pass. They built these little rock cairns. So interesting history. This is what the Andean people always did. And actually the Spanish came and outlawed it because it was paganistic. And so the people reverted to spitting as they went over passes and spitting and dropping out coca leaf wads out of their mouth. And then this tradition, resurfaced later in time. So you find this throughout Peru, these apachetas on these mountain passes. So really cool drive, just huge sky, big open land, driving from Arequipa over to Lake Titicaca. And a lot of little communities as well that raise these alpaca and vicuña, all the camelids that you'll stop and visit with. They do not get many tourists driving this road, just because the majority of the visitors are in the Cusco, Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu area. So moving on to Lake Titicaca and Titilaka, talking about accessibility here. So getting to Lake Titicaca, Lake Titicaca is obviously split over the Bolivian. It shares, the lake is kind of split halfway between Bolivia and Peru. The Peruvian side is what we're talking about today, and kind of the access point. The main airport is called Juliaca. They have direct flights to Juliaca from Cusco, which is only 45 minutes, and then from Lima, which is an hour and a half. So, a lot of people that have been in Cusco and the Sacred Valley and Machu Picchu area will just fly up to Juliaca to get there. You can drive, it's 10 hours or so. Either a 45-minute flight or a 10-hour drive you can choose from. You can also do that train, which is an overnight train. Also, a lot of people are finishing their trip in Lake Titicaca and then will fly directly from Lake Titicaca to Lima to connect with their international flight home. So that's kind of the accessibility of it. And then I want to talk about Lake Titicaca as a visitor and how you access it. So this is Juliaca. So when you fly in there, you'll be picked up by a private transfer from the hotel, and then it's about a 90-minute drive to get to the hotel Titilaka. There's the large town of Puno itself, which is 45 minutes. If you're coming in by train, you're going to arrive into the station in Puno. What I want to point out here is that, of all the visitors to Peru that go to Lake Titicaca, I would say 98% of them go and they stay in Puno. All the hotels, all the services are in that town of Puno. It's maybe, 300,000 people, kind of a cold, damp town on the lake shore. Listen, not great hotels or services in that immediate area. And it's kind of I describe it this way. It's everyone that goes to Lake Titicaca, if they're not looking about how they're visiting the lake, they're going to end up in Puno at a mediocre hotel, going on these really mediocre group tours doing the exact same tours with everybody else. It's very much like a place that has never changed the way that they do tourism there. They're like, people are just coming because most of the people just say, I want to say I've been to Lake Titicaca, but they don't really think about like what it means to go there and how they're going to experience it. So everyone's doing the same thing. They come into town, they all do the same amount of tours, and then they leave. Even though Titilaka is a longer drive, this is what makes it really amazing. It's a remote hotel on the lakeshore. You're not in the town. You haven't come there to be in another town. You've come there to see Lake Titicaca, the lake, and the cultures that surround it. So Titilaka is on this private peninsula on the lake. So you kind of, every window you look out of, you feel like you're on a boat because you're looking out over the lake. And then the neighbors, there's some small indigenous communities here. And the name Titilaka isn't just a play on words. It's actually the name of the indigenous community here called Titilaka, which means mouth of the puma. According to Aymara traditions, the lake of Lake Titicaca is in the shape of a puma. And if you actually look at that, where this bay is, where Titilaka is the jaws of the puma. So Titilaka means the mouth of the puma, and Titicaca means stone puma in Aymara language. So this is the hotel where it's located. And this is what you're coming for, these huge, huge lake views, huge sky views over the lake, incredible sunrises and sunsets over the lake, which you're not getting if you're staying in the town of Puno itself. And just the serenity of this lake. I mean, look, see, I'm there right now. Look at how chill out I am. It's just an incredible place. And particularly people that have been like in Cusco and the Sacred Valley and Machu Picchu, you know, they're ending up here. This is a real nice time just to kind of chill and reflect before they go home. It's a very powerful experience, a very mystical lake. It's not just the beauty of the lake. Lake Titicaca is really important, is that this was the kind of cradle of Andean civilization. So most of the dance and language and cuisine and traditions and gods and the mythology, they all originated in Lake Titicaca. This is very much a receptacle of cultural traditions that started at Lake Titicaca that are then spread throughout the Andes, kind of by the Incan Empire. I mean, the Incan Empire itself, their founding story came from, you know, the father, sun, and mother moon who put the first person down on Lake Titicaca, who then went out and sunk a staff in the Valley of Cusco, and that's where they founded the empire. But their origin myths all stem from Titicaca. So it still is an incredible cultural repository, and I think is like kind of an essential stop. If you're going to go to Peru and you visit Cusco and the Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu, you're seeing Incan times, which is a blip on the timeline, cultural timeline of Peru. But when you come to Lake Titicaca, you're tapping into something timeless in terms of the living cultures of Peru. So you have this balance of this like incredible boutique hotel with these indigenous cultures at Titilaka itself. So walk you through the hotel just a little bit. This is the entryway coming in, kind of lounge area. So there's tons of open space for people to find their own area just to sit and watch the lake and the sky change over it. I'm just going to check my chat here. So again, just little details of the property itself. It's a little gift shop. I love these little sheep that they do out of paper mache there as well. More of the sitting area, another lounge area. Sorry, they're doing construction here. Flower thing. So in terms of the restaurant here, most of the food is all sourced locally from local, from the fishermen on the lake, people from the community. So it's not uncommon when you're sitting in the dining room, you'll see the local people come up to the kitchen door. So I'm just checking the chat, to see the local people coming up and bringing their produce to the chef there. So it's incredible fresh food that you're eating here in a very, very small dining room. This is a Relais Chateau property as well, so you can expect the cuisine to be phenomenal here. It's just some shots of some of the dishes. And the outdoor sitting areas of the lake. Guys, give me 1 second. I'm gonna see if these guys can, okay, sorry, solucionado, that one. So again, the sitting areas outside of the property to enjoy the lake views. So this is a very small property. There's only 18 rooms in total in the hotel. You've got kind of the main lobby area, and then upstairs there's 2 more floors with the rooms there itself. So talking you through a couple of the rooms, the main categories are dawn and dusk. So basically on one level of the hotel, you have rooms that are facing the the sunrise area where the sun's coming up, and then the dusk rooms are facing more of the mountains. You still have lake views, but you also get the sunset on the backside. So you kind of choose what room you want to book based on if you're someone who gets up and enjoys the sunrise, or someone who enjoys being in the room in the evening hours and watching the sunset. That's a good way to think about it. So these are the dusk rooms. King rooms are on the ground floor, which are like handicapped accessible. And then up on the top layer, we have the corner suites, which are the largest rooms, which have panoramic views out of both sides looking out. So here's a couple shots of the corner rooms there, a little detail in the bathroom. This property as well is fully inclusive, so it includes all of the excursions for guests as well. Normally we have where we'll do shared excursions with hotel guests, but we also offer a private option. I'm not sure when we open up if we're going to be doing private only, but that is an option where you have a private guide, private vehicle for the duration of your excursion here. But there is a phenomenal number of excursions to do here. I would definitely say I wouldn't, minimum you would come up here and do is 2 nights. 3 nights allows more flexibility in what you can do and also having some downtime. If you're going to do something like 4 nights is fantastic. You can do tons and you can also have time just to enjoy the location of the property itself. So I'm going to talk you through some of the important excursions of what you do at Titilaka. So they kind of broken down into doing nautical excursions, which is this brown area, so going out by boat to see the lake, and then all this blue area are the land excursions there. So most people want to get out onto the lake. So Titilaka has their own boat called the Cirqa. This has 2 layers. It has an indoor cabin area and then also has a rooftop, which I'll show you in a later picture. But kind of we have to do a full day trip out on the lake. We're first going out to visit the Uros Islands. So these are, you know, famous in pictures, the reed islands of the Uros people, which is a certain ethnic group. They've been living on these floating reed islands for years. They actually cut the reeds and just pile them up and build them. So they'll build these as more people are born into the family. They're kind of centered around family groups. And so they can build these islands by piling on more and more reeds. But what's interesting is that the reeds are actually rotting from underneath. So they're constantly having to apply new layers of reeds on top. And when you actually visit these things, you are walking around and it feels like a waterbed. They're actually moving. And some funny things here is that with family dynamics is that there's certain rules, like when, you know, people marry, that the girl will come to live with the husband's family, but of like anywhere in the world, there are divorces and there's family feuds, and there has been, it happens in the past where families have decided to split, and they literally take a huge saw and they'll cut the island in half and they'll drag the island to another part of the bay, and then they anchor it there, and, you know, that's the solution there. It's much cheaper than a, you know, divorce attorney. So a fascinating culture to visit. You know, they live off of the lake. They catch, they hunt duck, they catch fish, they actually eat the reed, they make all their handicrafts out of the reed. So really loving people of the Uros, and they're their own ethnic group. These people actually have always lived like this, and then they kind of were abandoning living on the island up until about the 1960s or 70s as the real decline, until tourists started coming to the lake and people took an interest in actually their ethnicity and their lifestyle. And so the more and more people, the Uros people, are moving back to this lifestyle on the lake due to tourism coming, essentially. We go, like, it can be very touristic going to a lot of these islands, and there's something like 350 different Uros islands, floating islands. Most of the ones inside the bay are all visited by these big tour groups coming from Puno, whereas with Titilaka, we have an agreement with 2 families of these private islands that are much further away from Puno. We're coming from a different area, so we're able to go there, and we're the only people visiting these groups on the islands themselves. This is the upper deck of the boat. So that day we generally visit the Uros Islands for, you know, an hour and a half to learn how those people live, and then carry on to the island of Titilaka, which is one of the most beautiful places I think on planet Earth, and really fascinating culturally as well. So I mean, just the colors of this island, the silence on this island is just deafening, where you are on the roof of the world at such a high altitude, which I'm going to talk about. So there's the beautiful walks on the island, and you're walking by the local people that live there. I mean, you really feel like you've been transported onto another planet. Culturally, what's fascinating about this island in itself, so you have this island, and then they have Amantani, which is a sister island, which you generally don't visit. But the island of Titilaka here, this is a patriarchal society. So the men like manage the affairs of the island. They do all the thinking and the government of the island, and they stand around and they knit. They stand around and knit. You go around, these men are in these beautiful petticoats, these white shirts, and they're just standing around knitting. And then you're looking, and the women are like hauling firewood, and they're taking care of the children, plus they're weaving, plus they're cooking, and that's the way life is on the island. Well, you go over to Amantani, which is a sister island, which is just across the bay. And there it's a matriarchal society. And the women, they knit, they hang out, they run all the governments of the island, and the men do all the hard labor. And this all comes down to kind of an Andean cosmology that one can't exist without the other, and they balance each other out. So you've got like the feminine and the masculine living side by side, and one couldn't exist without the other. So it's a really all this stuff on Lake Titicaca is what's fascinating. As I talked about the cradle of Andean civilization, this is like such a mosaic of cultures. Every single island is different in terms of their dress and their customs, and even languages. So here on the lake, you've got the two main Andean languages, Aymara and Quechua, overlap over the lake. And these languages come from completely different linguistic groups. Tracing them back is really difficult for linguists to understand why they're here, but they're the two main ones. So there's no similarity between Quechua and Aymara. So these people that can't really communicate with each other, even though they're neighbors and they've been neighbors for thousands of years, they don't really speak each other's language. So the people are very used to I would say they're very used to being around strangers in silence comfortably. For that reason, and plus they're always very good at kind of charades and communicating with you without language, because that's how they have to live on Lake Titicaca. So here's the women on Lake Titicaca weaving, and Titilaka has set up with one of the families a beautiful picnic area where we do picnics, and we have like kind of a private lounge and bathroom there for guests on that day trip out to the island. So that's kind of a day out on the lake itself. And then you have all of these wonderful land excursions all in this blue area. And again, as I talked about, all the tourists coming into Puno, they're here, they do a lake trip, they go and they leave. But when you're coming to Titilaka, you're going out and you're experiencing things that no one else is able to experience on Lake Titicaca, except for people staying at Titilaka itself. So here's one of the private vehicles that we have, getting ready to take guests out on one of the excursions for the day. So just around that property, there's incredible hikes, really cool geological features to go up and hike and get views out over the lake itself. If you're into doing kind of active hiking, there's really cool. We have a great fleet of bikes, mountain bikes. And so we just go out with the guides and do these different routes around the Aymara Peninsula, visiting different communities and getting some exercise. And it's just a fascinating place to go around and see people out working in the fields and kind of interacting with them as you go along. This is one community in a village called Copamaya that does weaving. Most of the textiles actually in Titilaka, the hotel itself, all the bedspreads and stuff are made by this family. So we stop, whether you're driving, whether you're on a bike, whether you're walking, we'll stop and just visit with the family as well and kind of like see their lifestyle and how they weave. And all this stuff is fascinating. You see these different hats, like the women that have the bowler hats, which actually are more Aymara and actually date back to Victorian eras when the British were coming and building the railroads in Peru in the 1900s. This is when this became fashionable. French and English engineers that came to this area that were building the high altitude railways, these women were like, yo, these are so cool. And they started wearing it. They still wear these kind of Victorian era bowler hats nowadays. The little girl with the floppy hat, that signifies that she's unmarried. So there's a lot of messaging in all of their wear. Incredible markets, and like I talked about with the language thing, this is one of my favorite things, is visiting this market. I think it's the Colca market, or I can't remember the name, but it's about a 30-minute drive from the hotel itself. And this one, because you're so close to the Bolivian border, it's like, I mean, just this huge array of ethnic groups with these different languages and different products. And I mean, I always feel like going there, that opening scene in the original Star Wars, when you go in the intergalactic bar, and like people look so different and they're speaking different languages and they don't understand each other. You kind of get that same feel when you go into this market here, of just like all these different Andean traditions colliding in this market. Someone's bringing up stuff from the Amazon, someone's bringing this stuff from Bolivia, a fisherman's bringing stuff from the lake, and just watching this all play out in this market. I mean, much cooler than any other market you find, I think, anywhere else in Peru. And just in terms of the live living market, it's fascinating. And again, these women's hats and their shawls and everything that it signifies is really cool. And this is an area also around Lake Titicaca, is really like the folkloric capital of Peru. I mean, they party here big time. I mean, every month there's like different saints, different patron saints, different villages. So when you're often staying at Titilaka, the guides will say, hey, in this village down the road in Kasani, they're going to be celebrating their patron saint tomorrow. Who wants to go? And they'll take a small group just to go experience this one event that happens, that day each year. And they're going on every month. The biggest ones is in February, the Virgen de la Candelaria, which happens in February, around February 18, 19. That is phenomenal to see. So this is, if you really want to dive into folklore and tradition, like this is mind blowing. Everyone sees Cusco, Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu, the cultures and the people there, but it's really taken to another level of diversity when you're at Lake Titicaca itself. And then you have incredible colonial stuff as well. Some of the colonial churches there to visit, like Lampa, which is a great day trip if you're more into that type of history and architecture you can do. And then of course they do wonderful catered, picnics out on these excursions for guests in private. And then back to the hotel itself, if people really are like kind of burnt out at the end of their itinerary and don't want to be going in cars and vehicles and doing tons of stuff and want to enjoy the hotel and chill, there's a lot going on there. So we have a boathouse at the hotel, which we have little lasers, we have stand-up paddleboards, we have Canadian canoes, we have sit-on-top kayaks. And so this is a little seating area in the boathouse. People can just go there and just take one of these vessels out onto the lake and just go cruise around, which is really, really fun to do and really relaxing. They do sundowners every evening as well outside the hotel. They've got a bonfire going because the sunsets are just incredible at this elevation over the lake. So that's something that's kind of done nightly, is the sundowners outside of the hotel. And then we have one guide who's an incredible astronomer, and he does constellation observations in the evening. And people are always blown away by this because, again, it's just like a different way of seeing the night sky based off of their Aymara traditions. Here in the Andes, they don't make up constellations out of the bright stars. Like, they don't do point to point, connect the dots like we do in our culture. Their constellations are made up of the black spaces in the sky, particularly in the Milky Way. So most of the Andean constellations are actually black voided space amongst the stars rather than connecting the dots. So it's a really fascinating thing to do these nocturnal excursions. Someone I know is asking a question talking about altitude. Yes, Lake Titicaca is very high, so it's at 12,500 feet. Couple things here. You don't want to make this your first stop. You don't want to fly into Lima, fly straight up to Juliaca and go to Titicaca. People do it. I don't advise it. You know, getting up, anything that you go over 10,000 feet is when you're going to start really feeling the effects of like acute mountain sickness. And Lake Titicaca is no exception. So most people coming here, what I would advise is come in, either go from Lima to Arequipa, spend a few days in Arequipa to acclimate, and then go to Lake Titicaca. You should be good, having acclimated at that 7,000 foot level. Or you go do the Cusco, Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu area, where you're spending probably at least 5 days in that area. And then you can fly up to Juliaca. You're still going to feel the altitude because it kind of exponentially goes up once you pass 10,000 feet, but it is high elevation. Actually, during the check-in process at the hotel, we take people's blood oxygen levels through like a little finger cuff to see what their oxygenation levels in their blood. And we really don't advise or allow people to go out on excursions unless they're like 80% oxygen or up. We have oxygen at the hotel. We don't oxygenate the rooms because that's proven to be counterproductive for acclimating, but you know, we have a full-time nurse on site because altitude sickness is an issue here. But it's mostly coming for people that are coming straight here that aren't, you know, don't have a travel advisor who's doing a really well-designed itinerary in the area. And lastly, I just want to throw this out here. I mean, obviously, at a hotel like this, you know, they employ tons of people from the neighboring communities in the lake. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They enjoy having visitors there. They obviously do a lot of farming and they get stuff from the lake, but they have become accustomed to a lot of their income is coming from tourism, which is now, because of the, you know, coronavirus, has completely stopped here on the lake. Wonderful people. I've had a connection. I spent 10 years guiding there. This is one of the families. This is actually my godson on the island of Tequila. I've known this family for what, 30 years now or so. No, not that many, 25 or so, but this is my godson, and kind of some pictures over the years he grew with him and his sister. I actually ran into them in the Lima airport last, and I forgot to get a picture, but he's like, you know, teenager now, which is incredible. But just wonderful, wonderful, lovely people. I say some of the most welcoming people that you're going to find in Peru are these different communities on Lake Titicaca. And they're really struggling right now with the lack of tourism. We get questions all the time, when are people coming back? You know, I would imagine for them, it just feels a little bit like they're forgotten people. Here, one day they have all these people coming, taking interest in their life and their way of living, and all of a sudden, the next day, there's no one there as well. We have set up a community support fund. I'm going to include this in the follow-up email. So it's a GoFundMe thing. And it's just like, look, you know, yeah, we need to make money working in the travel industry, commissions, all the stuff, but really thinking about the down end. Like, these are the people that make the experience when you do have guests finally going to Lake Titicaca, and we want to support them, you know, during these times. And what they need right now is they need support financially, and they also need medical supplies as well. So we've set up a GoFundMe. I'm include the link. I understand it's a hard time for everybody, but I just want to throw it out there. You know, if you've got $10 to add to it, something like that, it would really, really mean, that $10 would mean, you know, the world to these people to receive some type of support, and just knowing that they're thought about by these visitors who are not there visiting them physically now, but the people are still wanting to come see them and thinking about maybe their visit to the lake before and what these people mean to them. So I'm going to send that link out in the follow-up. So